There were more than 10,000 anti-Semitic incidents across the U.S. within the year following Hamas's October 7 terrorist attack in Israel. That's a lot, right? In fact, it was the highest number of anti-Semitic incidents ever recorded in a one-year period since the Anti-Defamation League began tracking this back in 1979. In this episode of Your Voice Matters, we're making some sense of this data and the senseless acts of hate towards Jewish people with Oren Segal, Senior Vice President of Counter-Extremism and Intelligence at the Anti-Defamation League, where he works to combat anti-Semitism online and offline.
Oren Segal, thanks for joining us. You have been covering extremism and anti-Semitism for literally decades now. So give us an idea of the kind of ebb and flow where we are at this point in America.
Yeah. Anti-Semitism has always been part of the public discussion in America, the activities that we've been tracking, and the experiences of the Jewish community. However, we have not seen just the type of growth that we have been tracking in both anti-Semitic incidents and activities. And part of this is because, these hateful narratives are, so easy to access. In fact, probably more easy to access than in any other time in human history. And what we see that often starts online animates the real world activity, which makes the Jewish community feel vulnerable.
So are there particular trends or tipping points where you can start to say, you know what, I know that there's going to be an uptick in the next few weeks?
There are usually multiple different factors and tactics that lead to increases in anti-Semitism. One that we have seen play out, time and again, is conflict in the Middle East. When Israel is at war in Gaza or with others in its neighborhood, we often see a backlash in this country that includes people targeting Jews for the actions of the state of Israel. So for example, there's nothing wrong with criticism of Israeli policy, Israeli leadership, or activities. Like any other state, it's ripe to be criticized. However, what we tend to see is in the mind of some people, they conflate the Jewish community as representative of everything that the state of Israel does. And you have protests against, decisions and policies across the world that are animated in front of synagogues and other Jewish institutions in this country.
So is there something that is different about what's been happening post-October 7th, or does this follow a pattern that's somewhat predictable to you?
In previous years, we've seen conflict between Israel and whether it's terrorist organizations or others result in increased anti-Semitic incidents in this country. It's not new, but after October 7th, the volume and level is like nothing that we have seen before. 10,000 anti-Semitic incidents between October 7th of 23 and September 24th of 24, nearly one full year. And that includes, by the way, not just vandalism and harassment, but assault.
As you look across this space, and besides the sort of physical attacks, we're able to catalog online behavior much better now because sometimes people just leave the stuff up there, right? So I wonder, is the, explosion of hate or anti-Semitic content online, do you think that's organic? Do you think that's structured or organized?
Yeah. What people experience in online spaces when it comes to hate and, in particular, anti-Semitism has a broad range of originations, right? So in some cases, we see, extremists and anti-Semites just using social media to amplify their normal ideas and conspiracy theories. We also see foreign governments who, benefit from creating chaos and division within the country between different groups who seem to be, arming social media in order to foment that chaos. That includes the use of bots, right? Where it's originating from somewhere, but it may not be one human being. But we also have increasingly influencers in this country and abroad who are using their platform to spread the types of conspiracy theories that ultimately we have seen result in targeting of the Jewish community. So whether it's podcasters or whether it's, social media magnates, whether it's pundits, it seems like anti-Semitism has become something that is much more, readily available and more easy to spread than ever before. And part of me thinks that as bad as the increase in anti-Semitism is, the failure to recognize it when it is out there, to me, is even more troubling.
So is there a spot in the political spectrum? Is this coming from all sides?
Anti-Semitism is not the sole domain of any one extremist group or political movement or ideology. Many of the same conspiracies about Jews, whether it's, greed or power or whatever it is, we see on the left, we see on the right, and we see everywhere in between. And frankly, I think a lot of time is spent in this country with people on the left blaming the right for being more anti-Semitic, or people on the right blaming the left for being more anti-Semitic. Here's the reality. Anti-Semitism is everywhere. And I would hope that the people on the right would speak to the people on the right and tell them to stop it. And the people on the left would speak to the people on the left to tell them to stop it. Because when you are in that community and have that access to people, your message will resonate more.
So in the fact that you've looked at these patterns over time, what helps? What improves things? What changes the course of our conversation? And is that even possible? Are we living in uncharted territory? I mean, what do you think when you go to sleep at night?
This is a battle of hearts and minds. I think this is where it is important to make sure that we're fighting bad speech, disinformation, conspiracy theories with actual reality and good speech. That includes having a dialogue. The question that I have for people is, how do you have a dialogue with people that don't want to hear the opposing side, right? I mean, I think that's what is uncharted, is that being able to find areas where people can actually have that communication is much harder, since we're all relying on our phones to do much of that work these days.
Do you think that the current reaction from the administration to try to literally deport kids or students or people who might have been at these protests, regardless of what their involvement was, is going to set that process back, where we're basically saying, if you have a specific point of view, you're not just not welcome on the campus, but you're not welcome in the country?
Yeah. Listen, in America, you can be as hateful as you want to be, right? I mean, that is a protection that people have. What is not protected is, inciting violence, harassing, and engaging in other illegal activity. And so I think what is important is to create some disincentives. I think ultimately due process remains critical to any sort of response to anything that we see. But what's more important is that people on college campus, leaders, and that includes administrations, use their voice to try to not only educate their students, create a space for disagreement, but also make sure that that disagreement doesn't end up leading to harassment, violence, and some of the other elements that we've seen.
Oren Segal, the Senior Vice President of Counter-Extremism and Intelligence at the Anti-Defamation League. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks.